Hi, my name is Rosalind. I am moderating today. This panel came out of some conversations that we were having actually in the Fedora community about AI and their impacts on the practicality of our systems, and also conversations I've had with my own team, who is currently working on a project with Amazon. Greg Ritter is here today. He'll tell you about it, or I'll tell you about it. Hopefully they'll present at the next CNI. Hopefully. But I'm going to start off with a question, and each of the panelists are going to introduce themselves as they answer the very first question. It's a general question. So the first questions are, what are the biggest challenges you faced in implementing AI initiatives at your institution? And how have factors like funding, governance, politics, and broader campus interests interest in AI influenced your progress? So we're going to start with Annie and go down the line.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Annie Johnson, and I'm the Associate University Librarian for Publishing, Preservation, Research, and Digital Access at the University of Delaware Library, Museums, and Press. And I would say that our situation at the University of Delaware is maybe a little bit different than some of my colleagues on this panel and maybe other panels across the conference, and that our university has not invested a significant amount of money into AI. And so as a result, all of the AI efforts that have kind of taken place around campus have been, pretty decentralized. Different groups experimenting, doing research in different ways. And that has certainly been the case with the library. And I wanted to kind of say all that because I think that, especially at conferences like this, we often see some really amazing projects and we think, well, that's great, but I don't have the money to do that. I don't have the staff to do that. That's not possible for me. And I am here with an example from the University of Delaware to say that that's not true. I really, really believe that innovation around AI can come from everywhere. It doesn't just have to be folks with, millions of dollars and multi-developers to make something happen. And so I hope that this can maybe inspire some folks who haven't yet jumped into experimenting with AI tools because they think they can't. So what are we doing at the University of Delaware? Well, our big project is that we have launched an AI-based chatbot. We started work on the chatbot in summer of 2003, and it went live in January 2024. It's currently on our website. You can check it out right now. The chatbot is called UD Stacks, and it has been a deliberately collaborative project between library IT and our reference librarians, and it's involved staff from across the organization. We've really tried to get as many people involved, looking at the chatbot, examining answers, helping with the prompt as possible to kind of get people that hands-on training with the tool. And I don't have a lot of time today to go into our whole training process, but if you're interested in learning more, my colleagues and I recently wrote an article in Information Technology and Libraries in their recent AI issue, and that talks all about kind of the training process for us. We are currently running on ChatGPT 4.0, and while the intermediate tool that we use for the chatbot is not a fancy enterprise solution like IVAI or Element 451 that many other institutions of higher education are using, it has worked really well. And since we went live, it's only cost us $400. So I would say that as a pilot project, considering the small investment, it's been really, really valuable because, again, it's helped us upskill our staff. And it's also helped us position ourselves as kind of a leader on campus when it comes to understanding and implementing AI-based chatbots. And that kind of gets me to, I guess, where our biggest challenge has been. And that has really been that we haven't had any kind of centralized as a university, we haven't had any centralized mandates around the use of AI tools. And so when we wanted to start piloting this chatbot, there wasn't a university-wide solution for us, and there wasn't even really any guidance for how we should kind of go about this. So we really did it all on our own. We did the research ourselves. We skilled up ourselves, and we tried to be really open with our university IT about what we were doing. But I will say that not everyone within IT was super thrilled with the fact that we just kind of went ahead and did this ourselves. We didn't really ask permission, in part because we wanted to move quickly and kind of seize the moment. And so I would say that navigating the politics around our ability to have a chatbot and other units' ability, that haven't been able to have a chatbot has been one thing that has been kind of an interesting ongoing conversation between us and university IT. At this point, it does look like there is going to be an enterprise solution for campus when it comes to chatbots, because again, every unit wants their own. So I think one question that we're trying to work through right now with UDIT is, do we join them? Do we join up in this solution? Would it work for us? Would it not work for us? And that's ultimately going to depend on a lot of different factors. So we're kind of working through that right now. But I would say those kind of ongoing conversations with campus around campus regulations have been kind of the most challenging part of this so far. And I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Todd Grappone. I'm an associate university librarian at UCLA. And our conversation with AI is actually about a decade old. We've been working with some communications faculty members for a very long time who have been using these sort of tools and techniques to extract speech and text from large corpora of broadcast news media. So they're really interested in going through hundreds and hundreds and thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of hours of broadcast news, looking for speech patterns that match up with gestures. So a little bit, people saying something and the gesture that goes along with it. And I just, for years, I thought, isn't that really interesting? These tools and techniques that they can use to go through a giant corpora to find these very specific points. And so I've been working with them for quite a while. And I became a little more interested in some of their techniques one rainy morning in Los Angeles when I had to go to the basement of our library, where we had a room about this size filled with gift books, and no one to really look at them and process them. And a large portion of them were in Asian languages. And I thought to myself, why can't we just take a picture of the cover and use some of these AI tools to extract something that looks like a title and something that looks like an author? And maybe we could sort through these very quickly. And we, this technique, we started some experimentation at UCLA on an unprocessed collection that we had digitized some years ago of political flyers collected in Los Angeles. And so these flyers, we had digitized them and we hadn't actually cataloged them. So our team started looking at some of these tools and techniques to see if we could extract text from these images. And it worked okay. I think in a lot of ways, like the University of Delaware, I was really interested in trying to get a person in the loop to work with the engineers to make the tools better. Fast forward till last year, UCLA signed a contract with OpenAI to work with their tools. And my colleague Josh, who's right over there, they put out a call to campus to use the tool. And we put a proposal in, and we're able to get one of these coveted licenses. I mean, I don't know why they're so hard to get, but we got the license, and we're going to start this spring on doing something a little more in earnest. And we're very interested in using these techniques not only on scanned images, but also to on multimedia content again. We've got a lot of UCLA, part of UCLA Library is the Film and Television Archive. The Film and Television Archive is a huge collection of media, and we're very interested in using these tools to see if we can automate for ADA purposes. So yeah, I think that's kind of what we're doing. So thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aviva Weinraub-Lajoie. I'm the Vice Provost for Libraries at the University at Buffalo, which is part of the State University of New York system, also known as SUNY. I'm going to talk about a couple of things. So first of all, I will start off by saying that the University at Buffalo has been involved in AI research for many, many years. For those of you who are aware of one of the very first large language model implementations, this is connected to the U.S. Mail Service. Our VP for research is one of the primary architects of the ability for the U.S. Mail Service to be able to read the handwritten addresses and get your mail to your house. So our commitment and activities within that AI space have been, as I said, very long-term. The University of Buffalo is also home to one of the NSF AI Institutes. So we have been really investing for quite some time in AI as part of our kind of larger research enterprise. So I say all of that to sort of give you an idea that, as an institution, AI is part of the work that we've been doing, but we're not necessarily kind of like what Annie was saying. So we don't have a ton of money, right? We haven't had, as a library, a ton of infrastructure for technology support. We don't necessarily have teams of people who are interested or excited. That's not a fair way of saying that. Who are not necessarily imbued with the idea that they can try some things with AI. So within the library, we really only have one project that's going on within our special collections, which is around basically using AI tools, and it's actually Copilot, I think, to come up with program descriptions for a collection that we have that's with WBFO, which is our NPR station that's Buffalo, Niagara, so Western New York and Southern Ontario. So that's kind of one project that's happening in the library. But I think more importantly, and kind of what I really wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about was, so New York State in the spring of 2024, the governor in Buffalo came to Buffalo and made an announcement about Empire AI. So Empire AI is a public university and private university partnership to create a research infrastructure, an AI research infrastructure on-prem at the university. So this is meant for all of the major research universities within New York State to be able to have access to this research cluster, to be able to do whatever kinds of AI research they want to do. It actually went online last month, so it is officially up and running down on our downtown campus, which is where our academic research cluster is currently located. They are building out on our North Campus a larger data center to be able to handle AI research. We are expecting within about 4 to 6 months, that we'll be able to bring that online, and it will be 4 times faster than the infrastructure that we currently have on-prem, which is still pretty darn fast. So I'm just going to mention this because Tim wanted me to make sure that I did mention this. So UB also has a commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030. We are on track to be carbon neutral by 2030, and that means everything, including like carbon offsets for my travel, right? So we are committed to it as an institution, and the building of the AI infrastructure on our campus will be playing into that larger goal to be carbon neutral. So we are actually trying to build an on-prem infrastructure that will be carbon neutral as best as we possibly can, which is pretty cool. With all of that, I also wanted to kind of talk a little bit about how we've also been thinking really at the system level, so across SUNY, around research data and what we can be doing to make sure that we can build, like we can have data that we can then feed into Empire AI and use it as training data. So one of the things we've been talking about at the system level is actually creating a system-wide data curation network into a centralized data repository, and then we can use that data to train our own AI. I think I'll maybe stop there. That's a bunch of stuff that we've been kind of got going on, and we can dig into it a little bit more. And like I said, we don't have a ton of stuff going on within the library. Oh, sorry, I did want to talk a little bit about campus stuff. So the libraries have been very heavily involved. In fact, we have been on the sort of campus leadership team around all of our work around teaching and learning. So we were on the initial task force around this. We're on the implementation task force around it. We're in leadership positions across it. I'm on the steering committee. And we're also heavily involved in the way that AI will be playing out in the research enterprise. And so we've been heavily involved in conversations with our VPR's office. And again, this research data piece is kind of playing into that larger conversation with the VPR's office. I'll stop.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Shearer. I'm at UNC Chapel Hill with the University Libraries. I've decided to call myself a small LLM. So what I say today is the product of the training materials, and I just wanted to mention some of my colleagues. So the Vice Provost and University Librarian Maria Estorino, my colleague Michelle Cawley, who's the AUL for Health Affairs, Amanda Henley, who is part of Data Services, and a grad student, Cole Hargrave. So a lot of what I'm going to say is the product of that training, I would say. I'm going to talk first about campus and then about the libraries. So I decided that I was observing on this campus that this is the first time in my experience that what I think of as a technology project with vendors and risk and all those things had product ownership from the deans. When we moved from, for instance, on-prem to the cloud for Office 365, nobody cared about that except how annoying it was to them. But now we have a lot of product owners with conflicting ideas of what they mean when they say AI. And I found myself, without being asked, saying, hey, can we have grace for each other as we figure this out? So I wanted to mention that. There are a bunch of committees. I'm sure y'all are experiencing that on your campuses. But we have a new chancellor who was just installed, but who was interim in the beginning of this year. And one of his signature programs was AI, and he had a chancellor's committee. Maria Estorino, our university librarian, managed to get on that committee. And I'll mention that as she was hearing the work and the excitement around it, a lot of it was around research. A lot of people who are already miles ahead of other folks and have access to tooling and experience. And then a lot around operational excellence. What can we do to improve business processes and data? Yeah. But she wasn't hearing as much about students. And so she began to think about student support in the library's role on campus. There's also a dean's, I would call it, interest committee. So there's a group of deans that meet regularly to talk about this. And they actually went up to Microsoft's Innovation Hub for a 2-day retreat. And then there's a provost committee. And I would say that's really where the rubber is hitting the road in terms of actually doing AI on campus, which has 5 subcommittees. But I'll reel them off in case they're of interest. So there's one around pedagogy. How can students use AI in the classroom? There's one around campus strategy. There's one around communication. How are we going to actually bring communication together on this campus? I'm going to blank on one. And then the last one is the acceleration program. So at the time all this was coming to a head, we were revisiting our relationship with Microsoft around Azure. And so we actually did a commitment, I think of around $10 million over 5 years just for AI. And this actually was new money, which I think is a significant way to think about it. and we needed to figure out how to distribute that. So there's a AI acceleration program. There's a way to propose things. There's help in proposing things because a lot of people need to help craft that, and then we make decisions. We recommend it to the provost, and they get funded, hopefully. 2 library staff sit on those provost committees and then on the subcommittees, the provost committee and the subcommittee. I should also say that they negotiated for the co-pilot GPT for all UNC affiliates, and also did a pilot for the co-pilot. I wish they would name things differently. The co-pilot within Microsoft 365. So think Microsoft Word, Excel, Teams, Outlook, which they're pushing hard to recoup money. And I'm not sure we're totally seeing. It's nice to summarize meetings. Anyhow, so back to Maria and kind of where our heads are. We're thinking of ourselves as the big tent. We're not supporting a program or a school. We support everybody. We already have spaces and staff and expertise, and so we're thinking of ourselves as a potential home to help people kind of get off and running. So then to the libraries. In parallel to this, Maria had adopted this idea of road mapping, which is supposed to be sort of a nimble way to figure out what you're going to do in the near term and midterm horizon. And we came up with an AI roadmap. And we have 5 planks in that. So one is staff readiness, and I could talk about that later, but it's the idea that within a year, everyone on staff will have some exposure to at least AI, and many folks will have proficiency in it. Moving our library services and collections and people to meet the AI needs of campus is the second plank. The third is collections, which has its own plank, as it were, because we're thinking about the context of our unique materials in LLMs and what that means. We're looking at our risk profile that we used to have for the repositories, where there was a certain tolerance for risk, but it seems to go up a lot when you start to think about millions of eyes looking in a minute at your stuff. And then also the licensing stuff that you've probably heard some about today. The fourth is library work. So how are we going to use AI for our own work? We've been thinking about, which you've heard about today if you went to Yale's, but also I was thinking about John Dunn and Indiana's work around basically scaffolding access to special collections, but also digital accessibility, which in a couple of years for public institutions is a big problem to solve. AI seems to have promise for that. Also, systematic reviews and the health affairs side of campus, and we're also doing a fair amount of work around research impact. So there's some possibilities there. And the last plank is engagement, which is simply we're going to be wherever it is, including CNI panels. So.
Well, thank you, everybody. And I also want to call out Deborah Henkin-Kurtz was supposed to be on the panel, but she wasn't able to attend today. So we have an empty seat for her. So our next question, Annie, I was wondering if you could talk about it, since you were talking about your chat service, and I think this goes nicely with that, is how do you see AI impacting the roles of library staff, particularly in balancing between enhancing services and potential concerns about job displacement? Because I know that's something that people often talk about within our own organizations.
Yeah, and I will say that when we first kind of announced the chatbot that we're working towards a chatbot to staff, there were a lot of concerns, particularly from our reference librarians who were worried about, had a lot of worried about, misinformation, worried about their jobs being taken away, worried about impacts on the environment, worried about, all the things we worry about around AI. And we took that to heart, and I think really tried to, from a very early stage, involve our librarians in this process so that they could see, they weren't just presented with, here's a finished chatbot that's on our website, but we explained to them, we need your help. And so what ended up happening is the reference librarians ended up not only originally they created the original knowledge base for the chatbot, which was based on our FAQs, But then as we were adding more and more questions and getting new questions, they have been through this process of looking at those answers that the chatbot gives, telling us if they're, sufficient, not sufficient, giving feedback, helping us adjust the prompt again so that we are kind of staying within our lane, so to speak. It was very important for us, in part because of the concerns that we heard from reference librarians, that our chatbot really focus on spaces and services and not try to answer research questions. Now, I will say we're still getting research questions. That hasn't stopped students from asking those questions. But at least for this pilot period, we've really tried to limit it to, your garden variety FAQs that you're seeing from patrons as they come in. And that's been one way that we've mitigated concern. And again, just really bringing in the librarians into this process so that they're a part of it. They're learning about what the chatbot can do, what the chatbot can't do. I think that's been really helpful as well. I will say that originally we had this kind of idea that perhaps the chatbot would be an efficiency tool. It could maybe free up some of the reference work, take that off the plate of our librarians. Thus far, that has not proven to be the case, in part because we've just invested so much time in training the chatbot and refining. Maybe down the line, hopefully down the line, that might be the case, but that's not where we are now. So it hasn't been an efficiency tool thus far, but I think we're going to have to continue to have conversations with our staff about the role of these tools in the library and what that does mean for the future of our work and how some of that work might change as a result of the use of these tools, for sure.
Does anybody else have any thoughts?
I mentioned before a little project we're doing at UCLA to extract metadata from images and unprocessed books. And I do think, the idea that it might create some real efficiencies in some of the collections work that we want to do is real. It's a real possibility that we can get closer to the to actually processing unprocessed collections. But I think of it like this. I mean, those books had sat in our basement for about 20 years. That work was not getting done. Just flat out wasn't getting done. So we're not, if we can use these tools to increase the efficiency so that we can get to things that we haven't been able to previously, then I think it's going to be a wonderful thing, because we'll get to do, things that make those collections richer and deeper and even more accessible.
I guess one of the things that I might say is that, and I think most of us in this room know that, right? That with any technological revolution, your job changes, right? But it doesn't necessarily go away. Aspects of your job leave, they come back, like they move, they shift. Like that's been the story I've been trying to tell people with this, is just to say, yeah, your job will change, but your job's changed 700 times since you took it 3 years ago. So it'll modify itself over time. I started an AI action group in my library, which has a number of different responsibilities. One of which is actually to sort of hold our AI strategy. But that actually came later, if I'm being honest. But part of what they're doing is outreach and connection and sort of helping our staff learn about AI and really get a better understanding of it, so that there's not so much anxiety about it and maybe a little bit more excitement about what you could get from it. One of the things, and this is a little bit of an aside, but I just wanted to say this because I think it's actually a really important just thing to think about. So this fall at our senior leadership team retreats, this is the deans, the vice presidents, the vice provosts, the provost, the president, right, all come together every year for our annual retreat. And in preparation for that, our provost had all of us do that 8-hour Arizona State Teach AI and Teaching and Learning program. So if you haven't seen this or haven't heard of it, and you're looking for a way to kind of get your team all on the same page, this is actually a really good primer on like the basics of AI. And having the entire senior leadership team go through that process together actually helped some of the deans alleviate some of their anxiety about AI and have them have a better understanding of what AI was and how it might impact their the various parts of their work. And really, I think, a lot of this is about kind of mitigating anxiety, right? And so the best way to mitigate anxiety is to give people information that helps them not feel quite so anxious.
Rosalie, can I add one other thing that it just occurred to me as you were talking? A lot of times we process a collection, so we go do the whole thing. So we process a manuscript, we digitize the manuscript, we put it in the HathiTrust, and we go, oh, okay,
Done.
we're done. And then faculty members come and they say, oh, I want that table from that book, or I want, this, I think, these pages, or, something out of this thing that you've digitized. And this is where AI can really help, to extract data from something that's already been done. It saves a lot of time and hand coding, transcribing, spreadsheets of data from an old book into something that we can use. And so I do think it also adds a lot of value to the collections, just by being able to work in new ways with things that we've already figured we've finished with.
And I will add to that, if you haven't seen it yet, Northwestern has been prototyping something that will just pull that information from their digitized collections, which is pretty cool. So anyway, actually, I'm going to ask Tim a question, if he doesn't mind starting. What steps should libraries take to ensure the ethical use of AI, particularly regarding data privacy, faculty rights, and the risks associated with third-party companies? And if you know Tim, he likes a soapbox, and that is my favorite thing about him. So I love his answers.
So I really am going to come at it from a very specific perspective that I'm at least tracking on. So in mid to late May of 2024, we had what looked like a distributed denial of service attack, and it was on our repositories and our exhibits. And our ears perked up. First, it was, what are we going to do to keep the servers up? And that was the starting point. We ended up, in less than a week, blocking 4.3 million IP addresses just to keep the servers up and running. So I checked in with my campus colleagues, and nobody else that does technology on campus was getting slammed. And then I checked in with my colleagues in libraries and IT around the nation, and everybody was getting slammed. And so I was going to our leadership team saying, I think we've got to block these for now just to keep the services up and running. But I'm starting to get a little bit anxious, and this is where I'm coming from. UNC collects the South, and you can imagine what comes along with the South, including the Civil War, a great deal of information about enslaved peoples, protest imagery and video, oral histories of living human beings. And it's not that we digitize that stuff with the intent to keep it closed. Our goal is to make it open. That's why it's there. It's for collections as data. It's for researchers. But this hunger to train LLMs on human voices and human imagery is such an extreme hunger. And you start to think about how your collections are going to be used in a way that you didn't necessarily intend for them to be used. So yes, I would love this information to be in large language models for the big 3 or 4 that you are aware of. But we're also concerned about deep fakes. I don't want an oral history with a very convincing voice from a real human being to say things that they didn't say. I don't want to see an image from tearing down a Confederate monument a few years back with somebody in it that wasn't there, wearing regalia that's not theirs. There's just a lot of things to be concerned about. So we took this opportunity not just to block the scrapers for survival, but also to give us time to step back and convene a group to start talking about how do we want to engage with this. And the answer to that could well be leave it open. But we wanted to have the time and space to have those conversations. I also mentioned risk. So we have University Archives comes to the libraries on our campus, and so our digital repositories include campus records. Everyone clicks the little box that says, yes, I read the terms, and says that they don't have PII in it. And we always look at stuff, but we only have a limited number of folks. But our risk stance has been, it's probably okay. We've done a first pass, and we'll crowdsource this. And if one person in 6 months finds something, we'll take it down. At the same time, that's true for theses and dissertations as well. And then in the Carolina Digital Repository, the CDR, which is an IR, the same thing can be happening. Someone has an appendix with some stuff they didn't mean to leave in. Anyhow, we're actually taking this time also to revisit our risk stance because the opportunity to mine that stuff for PII just shoots way up.
And I just always keep I always just keep thinking that they are not paying attention to what the right statements are on it anyway. So
they don't care.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's less about bias or other kinds of ethical things. I will say that from my perspective, our staff largely weren't worried about losing their jobs. A lot of existential angst about the environment, sustainability, about deep fakes, about I don't know, the Terminator. And then a lot of other folks who are having trouble seeing the relevance for their jobs. So I feel like there's a lot of translational communication, understanding what's possible and helping people see how it fits their jobs.
I will also say, I mentioned that the Fedora community was having this conversation, and that's conversations between Tim, Scott Prater is also here. We were talking about that, and what Tim and I just had a conversation about this morning was our catalog is what has been attacked. And my understanding from vendors and vendors who manage infrastructure is your catalog is also being attacked. You just don't know it. And I think that is an important thing because it does go back to the ethics of AI. Who's getting access to your data? I think it's actually very relevant to conversations that have been happening about OCLC as well. So I think there is some tie in there.
And I can just add that our chatbot doesn't collect any information about users, and that was a very deliberate choice that we made. And we specifically tell our users not to include any PII in their responses. However, we have been thinking about, one of the things we've been seeing in questions that users ask the chatbot is about, their own library accounts, about the catalog. And so if we continue the chatbot and we want users to authenticate so that we could connect the chatbot to various other systems, that would make this a lot more complex because then we would be dealing with PII, and that would have a whole nother layer of complications that we haven't gotten there yet, but we've started thinking about it.
If I could add just a little bit, because Tim's comments really hit home with me. At UCLA, we have this wonderful digital library program called the Modern Endangered Archives Program. And what we are is we give small digitization grants for preservation to folks in the global South. And often those collections are at risk because of social justice issues or political issues. And we've always been strong advocates of open access. So part of the terms for us providing these funds for digitization is an open access license. It's become very apparent in the last couple of years that these digital libraries that we put up are experiencing new fundamental use from these AI services that we didn't really intend. And a lot of the folks whose content we've digitized, they are happy to provide it to us with open access, under open access terms, but they aren't really sure how to feel about them becoming, those collections and becoming part of the monetization effort from Microsoft, which is a real struggle. That open access piece and AI is a real confluence of issues for libraries, because not only of the things that I think Tim and I are talking about with regard to these collections, but also we've been pushing open access for so long, and now a lot of our authors are coming back going, oh, I didn't know Microsoft was going to use my open access publication. They were anyway. I mean, yeah, all our publishers are selling their content to these places, but it's become something we, as an industry, as a cultural heritage industry, I think, need to talk a lot more about, is what does open access mean in the world of Hugging Face.
Yeah, I think, Aviva, you had mentioned something about you'd notice more and more faculty coming back about agreements, I think it was, or...
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see faculty who are coming in and asking questions about, well, I signed this agreement 15 years ago to put this article here, and I didn't know that AI was going to be a thing that I was going to have to worry about, and now my stuff has been included in these training models, and that doesn't seem appropriate, and how do I get compensated, and what does that look like? And I actually, it's funny, as Todd was talking, I was thinking about, do you all remember the On Our Backs brouhaha about like 10 plus years ago, where there was On Our Backs was a Reveal Media, we worked with Reveal Media to basically digitize the entirety of that collection, make it available online. Well, this is a small lesbian magazine that was sort of shared with a relatively small group of people. It has naked images of people who are real life human beings who have jobs and, all sorts of stuff that they never expected that naked images of themselves would be available on the internet for researchers to use for whatever reason. And so I think we sometimes find ourselves in this situation where we have things that were created or collections that were created with an intent, right, or with a hope, and then we find ourselves sort of further along in this scenario where we're like, well, we didn't intend for our faculty's research to be used to train a closed system that, we don't know what it was trained on. I mean, it's, I think that what a lot of our faculty, I think, are starting to struggle with is this idea of like, I really have no control over what I've created. And that there is a real desire to claw back some of that control. And I'm not sure that our structures are necessarily going to make that happen.
I just wanted to jump in with 3 additional thoughts about this. One is that I just want to acknowledge this is an arms race that we're going to lose, but we're doing our darndest. The second is I've been in conversations with people like the whole point is to be open, and I think that's true when you're talking about research, teaching, learning, and I don't know that it is true if it's repurposing to create new things that could be harmful or to monetize this back to us. And the last thing I'll say is that I'm the most naive person in the room and the least likely to understand my leverage. But this is one of the few times where hundreds of years of collection development by relatively underfunded organizations and tons of labor to describe and make that accessible and digitize it is the very thing that they're desperate for. And I don't know that we're thinking about how we leverage that, if it's at all possible, because they're monetizing it back to our campuses, and it just drives me batty.
Yes, they've been doing.
So the next question I wanted to ask was really about campus partnerships. how can libraries, and Aviva, maybe you can take this since you have a multi-campus partnership. How can libraries collaborate with campus partners like IT and the Office of Research to drive effective AI adoption?
Sure. I mean, I don't know that I'm going to have some magic bullet for you, and I think it obviously depends on the institution that you're at and the administration that you have at your place of work. But I will say that I think one of the things that we've done a really good job of is kind of to Tim's point, is sort of articulating what we actually bring to the information landscape, right? So this is our job, this is our role, this is where we work, and this is why having us in this conversation now is vital and important. And I recognize that I happen to have a provost who is a very smart man, who is very sympathetic and really tries to understand what we're doing and recognizes that we're trying to do good work for the institution. And a VPR's office who wants to collaborate, and an IT office that wants to collaborate, right? We're a scrappy institution, and so we have to work together, and we want to. What I will say is that I think you have to come in with not a like yes to everything, but okay, maybe it's not us here, but how do we help you figure out where this works? And then you get seen as sort of that glue piece of trying to get people together and talking about the right things and bringing people in. I mean, I think one of the other things is we often ask the right questions. I think Tim actually has a good example that we were talking about earlier about you have a group of researchers who come together, they're working on whatever it is that they're working on, they think they know the answer to it, and then you come in and you say, but what about the students, right? How does that impact students? Or okay, what happens if you want to transfer that data someplace else, right? Like, we ask different questions, and I think that if you can find opportunities to just ask questions sometimes, that can really open up doors and invite you into conversations. I'll also say that for us on the system level, so look, New York State, generally speaking, is a state that views investment in higher education as a driver for innovation and change, right? That is a rare thing, I think, in the current higher education marketplace to hear me say, right? So recognizing that's my institutional, that's my system scenario, right? What that means is that, 6 months ago, the chancellor said, I want to put $10 million toward figuring out data, right? What do the university centers and the PhD granting institutions need around data? And here's $10 million to try and figure it out. Sorry, $100 million to try and figure it out, right? Okay, well, that's operational effectiveness, that's research, that's, RIM systems, that's all of that. We're getting that kind of investment, and so we're invited into these conversations because we keep saying, here's where we have value, and so we do keep getting added into the conversations. But I think part of it again is that all of the deans, I don't know where Kareem is, but we've all been we've all been sort of pushing on this idea that data is the future of libraries, and you can't train AI without data, and if you want that curated properly, and you want it something that you can use, you need libraries and the work that we're doing to make that happen, and that seems to be resonating. So I don't have a good answer.
I will just jump in and say, I think that when it comes to the teaching and learning efforts around AI on our campus, early on it was recognized that the library had a clear role to play, and we have been involved in those, organizing seminars and things like that from day one. In terms of the library's involvement with IT efforts in the research office, that has been really more me attending all the meetings I can attend to try to position ourselves and say we have things that we can add to these conversations. We have expertise we can bring to these projects. Again, I think our chatbot we showed as an early example on our campus that we know how to do this work and we can help you do this work too. So we're trying to show our value and get into some of those spaces where we're not naturally recognized as partners or innovators. And I think we'll just continue knocking on those doors and continue trying to be in all those meetings.
Todd's going to give his answer real quick, but we're going to start taking questions. So if you have a question, please feel free to come up to the mic.
Oh, okay. I'll keep it brief. I just wanted to reflect a little bit for myself. This morning, I guess was it this afternoon, Cliff was talking, and he did a little bit of...
Todd's from the West Coast, everybody.
He was talking a little bit about signposting and sort of what it looked like when CNI started. And I just was sort of struck by, it's called the Coalition for Networked Information. And there have been just a few, I think, seminal technologies in the history that I feel like have had the potential to have a giant impact on the work we do in libraries. Networking was one of those. And I really feel like artificial intelligence is the next one. It does a lot of the same things. It wants to do a lot of the same things that libraries do, and it wants to do them as well as we do it. I don't know that it will ever get there, but the fact that we've been doing this sort of thing for a really, really, really long time, answering reference questions, describing content, we're incredibly well positioned as an industry to have a really big impact on how these things impact our campus. One of the things that struck me when we were talking about our project at UCLA last week was just kind of how far ahead we were from a lot of the other units on campus. I was just kind of floored, because we have been doing this kind of experimentation for a while. So I guess my final thought on this is just do it. Just do it. I think all of our panelists would agree. A large LLM, a small LLM, just do it because it'll be great.
I do want to grab the mic just to say that at UNC Chapel Hill, the libraries, to meet this need for students, are creating something called an AI studio. And the principle is to democratize access, to close the digital divide, to provide a home for people to get from 0 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour. We're not necessarily going to push them into the stratosphere, but we never know where the next great idea is going to come from. We also know that it'll have to evolve. The campus will have a different makeup and experiential level in a couple of years, but this has gotten great traction with the chancellor, the provost, the deans, and campus IT, and the libraries are a great place to host it. We have people, we have buildings, we have hours, we have expertise, and we're really excited. And I can talk to anyone who wants to know more about that.
And it's about information.
Are there questions from folks? Oh, here we go. Yay.
Hi, my name is Yasmin Shurish. I'm at James Madison University. Thank you for the panel. My question comes from a context of working on collections as data for several years, seemingly forever. And Todd, you were saying like our profession has a lot to offer into this AI ecosystem. And I'm wondering if you all are having conversations about how you wield that power in these conversations on your campus where there's a lot of cross-campus interest in implementing AI solutions or platforms or different agents, but we have professional values that can sometimes be in conflict with that. And I also think this is a time to really lean into what we learned from practices of community archives and that centering of communities and the objects that the collections are about. And then kind of bring up the CARE data principles into that equal footing with FAIR. How are you, tell me you're having those conversations, I guess, first of all, and then how are they going? Thanks.
Well, I can say that those conversations, we are having them. They're actually very, very central to some of the collecting efforts. But your other question is, how do we wield our power on campus, which I think is a really interesting question. I'll let my other panelists talk about this a little bit, but, I just did, over the course of the last couple of years, a research data working group to develop sort of a research data infrastructure roadmap for UCLA, right? And part of the ask that we made to invest from campus was really an investment in the library to digitize and process our library collections. We made that ask because a lot of folks wanted to use our collections for AI experimentation. So, you know, we wield that power by being a partner. We wield that power by just being and doing what we good work, you know, answering questions. You know, there is a human needed in the feedback loop in order to make AI better. You know, we do that really well. I think it would be wonderful if we had librarians, you know, prompt engineering, you know, anything from reference question to data management plan. There's a lot of ways we could be partners in the organization in and around our collections for AI.
Are there any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left. Oh.
It's not a question, it's a comment. Karim Bagwida, Stony Brook University, the other SUNY. Hey. Yes. It's a thank you note to the panelists and many of you here, because I've been advocating for AI for a very long time. And finally, I feel really high level of maturity. So there's a lot going on now. Before, like, it was barely kind of conversation, now it's happening. And also in terms of campus partners, it's happening and people are listening to you. And they know you have the data, you know the know-how, and you know how to manage things and get things moving forward. So just a big thank you and meta note.
So thanks, Karim. And you know, these tools are hungry for the data that we have, our oral histories, our books, our manuscripts, our maps, everything. These things are really hungry for it. But you know, you got to get out there and let people know you've got these things. Otherwise, your integrated library system looks like it's under attack.
Metadata is the other thing they really want.
Hi, I'm Ji Wuxie from UC Riverside. I also want to just make a comment that it seems to me that the library's AI focus currently is rather leaning on our collections, metadata. It feels to me a little bit too inward looking. I also want to mention that large language model is not AI, it's only a small part of AI. CNN, all the other things, AlphaFold is not LLM. So I want to mention that we don't want to forget the other side of the AI spectrum. And lots of our faculty members' research does not lean on our collections. The data came from microscope, telescope, came from LiDAR data collected from the road. I just want to mention, we don't want to forget that. The library also has a role to play there. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk as much about it in the session as maybe we could have, but I think the teaching and learning part of our work with AI, I think, is really significant. And while as a panel, I think we spent a lot of time talking about our collections as a sort of training piece of into AI, I think there's been a lot of work, and I would imagine many of us, but you know, we, like at UB, have done a ton of work in teaching and learning and a ton of work on, so we have a portion of our English 105, which is, you know, our freshman English course. We do a significant portion of that. We're responsible for all the information literacy portions of it and research and whatnot. And we've already started doing more around AI, sort of understanding AI in that context, and we're expecting that that's just going to expand. So recently, the system made a decision that AI literacy is now a requirement for all of our students to graduate, and that is something that is expected that the library will have a much bigger role in that part of teaching. Your point is well taken. There are a lot of other pieces that we're doing, and of course, teaching and learning is also just one other small piece of where that is. But we've also been doing AI work with faculty about actually like integrating AI tools into their pedagogy and like actually doing it in the classroom. And so we can talk about that too, but we don't have enough time to do. But you're right, 100%.
We'll let you ask, but I just want to thank everybody, since we're at time, for attending and hearing our panelists speak. So thank you all. Claire, do you want to?
Yeah, hi, I'm Claire Knowles from the University of Leeds, and it goes back to Tim's point about paying again, I think, for our collections being used in AI models, and how can we work together to create some of the tools based on our collections rather than paying the vendors again for the content.
Yeah.
I don't have a great answer, but I will say that the scale of spending, I'll just choose Microsoft, is insane. And the need to recoup those funds is insane. And I feel like it's an order of magnitude different than some of the things that we've talked about many, many times in our communities. So I feel like there ought to be something we should be talking about collectively, but I don't know.
Well, thanks again, everybody.